Hi, welcome to the Big XR News Show, the first of 2025. There's a lot of topics to discuss here today, and I'm once again joined by our expert panelists, Jay Latta, Amy Peck, Jennifer Rogers, and Kevin O'Donovan. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and for another year of this show. It's been a busy month already for the tech industry and the news at large, really, in 2025. But let's kick off and talk about CES and how it's reflected onto the emerging tech sector, namely XR. Amy, Kevin, we were just talking. I know you're both there at the event. Could you perhaps introduce what the XR landscape at CES looked like? Perhaps some highlights for companies that you saw there: Sony, Xreal, Nvidia, etc. There's a lot of companies there for enterprise-facing XR. Then Jay, Jennifer, it'd be great to get some of your thoughts on these companies too. But perhaps Amy, could you kick us off? What do you see at CES? What's excited you in terms of XR?
Yeah, I was very, first of all, I find CES to be like the pain of childbirth. It's a little overwhelming. So I was really looking at a lot more of some of the adjacent technologies, some of the things that we'll talk about later in the show, but things that are kind of supporting the XR industry. Obviously, AI. I went to a couple panels on space and IoT in space and data centers in space. Uh, a lot of the robotics I find really fascinating. And so I actually wasn't quite as focused specifically on XR, especially since the headset landscape now seems to be kind of a non-starter for most companies. Most companies are backing away. A lot of companies who have deployed are not anxious to either buy more devices or different devices. So really, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, how are all of these technologies, we use the word convergence so much, so I'll use the word coalesce. How are all these technologies coalescing for the enterprise solutions of the future? And it is the Wild West right now. So I'll stop there and I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Yes, definitely. Because I think we'll touch on some of those points of the technology coming together. But Kevin, please, I know you've been hands-on with some tech there as well.
Yeah, it's the usual kid in a toy shop. To Amy's point, CES is overwhelming, right? It is organized chaos, and it's getting bigger. The halls are getting bigger. The amount of companies that are getting bigger, and the marketing hype is getting bigger. I suppose overall at CES, AI was just, God, you couldn't swing a cat without hitting AI, and there was cat-enabled toilets, and there was AI-enabled AI-enabled spice racks, and AI was in everything, right? It was a bit stupid at times, right? But cut long story short, to Amy's point, I think the comment on coalescing is interesting. So there were a bunch of companies there with their headsets and OEMs, you white label and new lenses. A lot of the AI around kind of interaction was all around kind of I'll talk to it. So kind of the Ray-Bans kind of knockoffs, and there was a lot of companies with that kind of stuff. A couple of interesting companies there with XR related technologies for people with eyesight problems, so healthcare kind of linked. And again, back to this kind of munging together different industries. And certainly from the enterprise space, so I spent a good bit of time going down the Nvidia rat hole with the whole physical AI. Siemens were back. Sony had a decent announcement with the Sony Zen, XYN, the whole headset and the environment. But I think to Amy's point is that everyone's kind of waiting for, there's too many moving parts right now. And it's not just about the killer headset or the killer app. I need to kind of build all the platform or the foundation. I need to get all my data. I need to train the AI. There's so many moving pieces. So the people are kind of waiting for kind of bits to fall in together. And then they're trying to figure out, where do I start? And is it I need to put all the data together first, and then I can start building something, because I can't jump in. Now, lots of innovation, lots of cool things, lots of interesting things on haptics as well. I'm not going to cover some of that. So plenty of innovation, but yeah, organized chaos, but step forward. Way more industry companies, that, like as in heavy industry, industrial companies. I know CES wants, don't use the word consumer anymore. It's CES, not anything else. So it's interesting.
Jennifer, have you seen any reflections over your side, what you're doing with heavy industry, etc.? Have you heard anything coming from CES that has affected you? Then Jay will jump onto your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So obviously lots of interest, as everyone has said, around AI and particularly from an operational perspective. I think Amy used the word coalescence. I think it's appropriate, right? As we start to think about operational processes um, and how we make that connection between all of the different equipment and OEMs and everything else, as well as the worker. Definitely conversation about the ways in which to utilize AI, and particularly in service of IoT. So, that space continuing to have a lot of buzz and people trying to work out all the tricky parts of what you have to do from a data perspective to make all of that happen. So, continuing to see that emphasis and focus this year, where people are really kind of committing to the idea of the ways in which they can utilize AI in particular around operational processes. And I know we'll get into that once again a little bit more as we talk about some of the other topics that we have to share today. Um, I'll agree with Kevin. I think, lots of buzz around AI in general and the spice rack in terms of we could use it for this and we could use it for this and we could use it for this, right? But a little bit of what we've talked about before still in terms of a solution in search of a problem. It's interesting to see people kind of wrapping their mind around the art of the possible. And I'm hopeful that this year, we start to really focus on some of those deep use cases that we've talked about before in the space.
Fantastic. I like the wording almost. I know it's a specific technology you're referring to, but the AI spice rack is kind of a good metaphor there of all the different bits you can pull from that technology. Jay, any other thoughts on CES? Some of the bits you've noticed from some of the big firms, Sony, X-Real, Nvidia, excuse me, etc.
Well, now that you've mentioned that you like the wording of my colleagues, I want to bring in a different type of wording, and it's a shit show. I mean, everyone is just running around and putting AI labels onto something. We've seen this already from the metaverse. We've seen this from blockchain. We've seen this yada yada. All of this nonsense. It's simply a hysteric approach to get as much money as possible because no one can really afford to miss something. But the essentials, it's still the old fairy tale of we have artificial intelligence, which does not exist. We have some kind of autistic intelligence. These are niches. If you've ever tried to combine multiple disciplines to get some kind of valuable assistant, halfway, universal, or to cover multiple disciplines, it's nearly impossible because each of them needs an own data set, needs an own training, and it blows up everything. But CES, okay, yes, nice, many cool stories. I've been surprised by the approach from Nvidia, of course, how they try to embed everything around Omniverse, which is, in my opinion, quite a clever move. Also to embed any kind of robotics now that automotives, my very favorite guys, are thinking that they can use humanoid robots for all the other stuff and replace humans. So training remote operations is, of course, something that will hit very hard. I've been very surprised that Omniverse is focused so on the Vision Pro because it's really this kind of will they release a new thing now that Meta, for example, discontinues their Pro, so more unreliability on the professional side, and here's something that is already somehow discontinued is still pushed forward. So I don't know exactly what kind of background deal is going on, but I will definitely, let's say, observe it a little bit more closely, especially from the perspective on robotics. So here, having this heavy digital twin setup, whatever, for future of manufacturing, visualization, collaboration, and of course also prediction. This is a very important part. Then to enrich it with spatial computing, so with the Vision Pro, and to enable or to use it for robot training. It gives it a completely new perspective and new features.
Well, it's interesting you touch on the Nvidia robotics, the role Apple Vision Pro plays in that. I like the sort of conversation piece you had there of, why is Vision Pro being picked for that Nvidia, that broader robotics play. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on the Nvidia robotics piece, the physical AI side of things. Robotics could potentially be, or at least maybe it's being sold as another growth platform for the XR industry, namely with a use case for headsets, simulation, etc. Jay, I don't know if you have any continuing thoughts about if robotics is at that potential growth, and then if anybody else wants to touch on that parallel, please could jump in.
So as first, XR is an enabler for all the other tech stuff. Here, to get free from a display, to see it in your peripheral view or in the direct view, is really something very, very valuable. So I don't see XR as the self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's a core enabler for all the other stuff around. With robotics, especially from not just from the training, but imagine, for example, if a next pandemic would hit us, if people are being in home office again. There are many jobs that cannot go into a home office. They have to be present somewhere. So now imagine if a remote robot would be rolled out, if it's in healthcare, if it's in manufacturing, if it's delivering something, if it's policing, and so on. So here, I've made even this kind of joke now that the new administration in the US likes to plan mass migration somewhere else. It's not just them. Here in Germany, we are very curious how it will look like, because the right wings would like to mass deport every single person that does not belong here. Haha, me too. The thing is that we all of these developed countries struggle with skilled workers. So pushing away people that you don't want, but you need their work. Here, robotics might be something, even if it's remote robotics. In China, they are planning this a little bit more ahead, so that you can, maybe through the next pandemic, stay in your jammies at home and still be in heavy manufacturing, in construction area, in wherever. So this is really something, and here, even if I don't like Melan, it was quite impressive how his robots were remotely operated moving last year when he introduced the robo taxi and the robo van, that how far they are with more haptics and so on. Here is a completely new area to give the people the possibility, even if it might be misused, which means, for example, hiring cheap labor somewhere in Vietnam for your factory in the US or in UK or wherever. So this is really something that will have such a huge impact for regulation, for even what does it mean for connectivity? I had this experience last year when I've tested a healthcare robot with immersive headset. It was something from Meta, whatever. And they've put me in front of a mirror. I woke up looking into the mirror. I've seen my face on the display of this robot. And this was already the first some kind of, woo, what's going on? Then you turn around and you see yourself in the middle of the room with the controllers, and you constantly, it was such an out-of-body experience, and you constantly are checking, does anyone hit me, or simply taking care, because it's like your own body becomes numb, because you are then with your presence in this robot. So here, this impact on robotics, on humanoid robotics and remote robotics will be huge. This might cause a completely new industrial revolution.
Brilliant. Anybody else want to jump on that? It's a big talking point, really, robotics, and also the way it can grow alongside XR, as you say, as a platform to as another tool for that space in its own right, rather than perhaps the focus being on XR.
Yeah, I want to throw in maybe a counterpoint perspective to what my colleague Jay just shared there, because it's very interesting. I'm quite excited by what we can do to advance some of the aspects of robotics, particularly in heavy industrial and almost specifically in construction and some of those spaces, because a lot of them require pretty high precision work, where we don't see a case in the near future where we're replacing humans at all with robots. In fact, if we can get robotics to a place in which it can assist in a more efficient way from a high precision perspective, we can actually make trades and jobs more accessible for people who maybe couldn't participate in some of those trades before. So there's some really exciting things going on, like I said, particularly in the construction space that I'm seeing, whereby we're talking about, if robotics can advance a little bit further than where it is in the space right now. And we're talking about critical infrastructure and things like that, where, we need to be very, very confident in what's happening there. If we can advance that, which XR can potentially play a role in that, right, in terms of developing that space, we can actually find more talent to bring into the labor market and participate in some of these trades where it's critical that we have more workers who can really roll up their sleeves and help us with some of the challenges that we expect to face globally around critical infrastructure in coming years. So it's kind of the flip to that, right? It's not robots taking over the world and taking away jobs and all of those kinds of things. It's actually augmenting the human experience, whereby we actually provide more opportunity for individuals in the trades who, for a variety of reasons, may not have had the ability to engage in the work before. So it's actually a really exciting topic that I'm hearing more and more about right now. That's kind of intriguing to me. Right? How do we develop robotics potentially through XR that then enables that augmentation between human and robotics in a more seamless way, whereby we can actually put that to work in critical spaces where precision is paramount?
Fantastic. Amy, Kevin, it'd be great to get some of your thoughts because you were there at CES where sort of the physical AI side was there too. So,
Yeah, because I think it's interesting, the humanoid robot point of this, as opposed to just, robotics and automation, as we move from kind of automation to autonomy. And then you start talking about, kind of agentic AI and where these, AI agents will be kind of working independently of one another. I think, and this is probably something that IEEE will be paying quite a bit of attention to, is that we do need to think about, where we need a human in the mix with this. And instead of just, assuming that, we train these models, we do, a few safety tests, and now we can throw them out into the world, because humans are erratic on their best day. And so it's going to be interesting to see, I think on the positive side, it brings, these types of robots can bring also, logic. They can bring kind of a, a physical, augmented physical, abilities that we don't have. But I do have some concerns around this next step, where either the robots or the AI agents are interacting on their own, because any flawed data in, any of these algorithms then gets magnified, between these agents as they work together. So I think that's something that we need to be cautious of, that I do find really fascinating, though. And I think also from, we did bring up healthcare, there are some really interesting studies about even these more kind of toy robots and combating loneliness. State of New York, deployed, a number of these sort of very cute little robots to the elderly in upstate New York. And even though intellectually we know that it's an inanimate object, it does provide some solace. So I think from a human standpoint, a lot more research will uncover some incredible use cases and ways in which, to your point, Jennifer, we can seamlessly integrate these humanoid robots into our lives without trusting them 100%. Just like we shouldn't trust humans 100%.
They have to have an off switch. You know, to Amy's point, again at CES, you have robots and there's the whole gambit, right? You had the industrial inspection robots, so the dogs that walk around, the robots that roll around. You had quite a few, especially in the CES Unveiled, the kind of the home, the helper robot, you know, cute and cuddly and a bit more for the home and for healthcare and whatever. I think one of the standout ones that I saw was a thing called Tombot. This was a robot dog, didn't move, but just lived there. It was for people with dementia, and it was a puppy, and it responded to them stroking it and whatever, something to look after. So there's all sorts of uses. Specifically on the physical AI with Nvidia. So I ran down that rat hole while I was there with Nvidia, with Accenture, with Coin Group and others. I think it's... I personally wasn't aware that, let's say, the advancement in the whole humanoid robotics was as far as it was in terms of the amount of different humanoid robots you can get, right? The different companies making them. There's a lot of different ones out there. I think it was fascinating to see how Nvidia have kind of built up, and Jay, you mentioned about Omniverse, but so that whole stack, and they have built in physical AI, and you've got the Cosmos foundational model. You've got the NIM microservices. You've got Mega for kind of blueprints for here, put this in your factory. And what I took away from it was the initial drive here. Forget about all the autonomous cars and vehicles and tractors and everything they're doing as well. But the humanoid robot was working in a warehouse, kind of going from here to there, taking this from here to there, whatever, right? It wasn't out in the street directing the traffic and whatever. So again, very limited use case, incredible technology, but the amount they've done and the way they've built up the stack and the ability to train and the models and the amount of stuff they're giving out for free, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. And now, two points, if I may, just off the top of my head. These things will certainly replace humans in some jobs. And the problem is we can't get those humans in most places anyway. And it's not about hiring the cheapest person and bringing him in, or immigrant or whatever. Everyone needs a decent living wage. So, there will be places where robots will be used autonomously. And Jay, I do see a link with, there will be some times where robots will be worked remotely by somebody. But I think that's very small use cases. And Jennifer, to your point, there is certain work where, building and whatever, even plastering. Now, you can get plastering robots and whatever, but at the same time, there's a lot of jobs where humans we still need the touch and whatever. I saw a lot of stuff on haptics, the XR training of robots to be able to tell them how to, you're basically training the robot how to twist its joints to move things in or around. I think that's all going to expand in the next 12 months. But I think what Nvidia have done has accelerated it.
No, not at all. No. Simply the compute power is not there. These humanoid robots are not modularly built so that you can simply plug in another brain. All of the currently you need a central AI backend. So what we are talking here about is edge AI. All of these things are not situation aware. They don't understand context. So if something falls down, this robot is not able to jump over it, because he can only do what he learned to do. Then he's just a MoMA would be. Now it's really.
Jay, we're not building iRobot from the movie. We're talking about something that moves from here to there. Now,
it walks like an old man that shit at his pants. It can lift only 20 kilograms, not more. It moves slowly. If you want to sell it, your marketing department has to make it fast forward so that you see somehow these movements. Currently, majority of these are marketing fake.
So the industry is certainly starting out in its baby steps. But if you want to be that dismissive of it, then fair play. But we'll come back in a couple of years. This is just starting out. Now, your point about edge AI is absolutely correct, right? In terms of, but look at what Qualcomm, Intel, AMD, Nvidia, and. Look at the compute power that are now going out into these things, right? So look, hey, I'm not saying they're going to take over the world. Hopefully they're not going to take over the world tomorrow. But do not dismiss this at your peril.
No, hold on. It's not about taking over the world. Maybe it would be a better place than the shit show that we have right now. The thing is, the compute power, all of these algorithms are 70 years old. The compute power that we have right now that can combine billions of parameters, yes, sure, but this is not how intelligence works like. This is just mimicking.
We're talking apples and oranges, Jay. Apples and oranges.
I can also bring it back to the idea that, we're talking a lot about when it comes to XR and robotics, the piece that really connects some of this together is not just the remote operation, but then also the simulation piece behind that as well. And I'm seeing certain XR companies, storied ones, perhaps the XR companies rebranding to a certain degree towards real-time 3D companies rather than solely focusing on XR companies, probably to hit that simulation market. Do you think that this robotics boom will then have perhaps a knock-on effect of how certain XR companies brand themselves and put themselves forward instead of XR perhaps going more towards real-time 3D and simulation focuses?
Well, it has to. I mean, and the thing is that I think that we're so focused on, to your point, the rebranding. It's like here we are, all XR immersive people talking about robotics and AI. Like everyone is having to become, an expert on everything. And what we really need to focus on is, again, and this kind of goes back to something I just promote ad nauseum, is these sort of parallel paths to innovation. And one of them, which we know very well, which is very well trodden by, robots and otherwise, is that, incremental improvement using technology. So how do we do what we already know how to do a little bit better, a little bit faster, more safely, and so forth, right? And we know how to do that, but that keeps getting better. What this technology is going to be an enabler of is actually just rethinking how we do everything. And if we can start to train some of these models into, for lack of a better term, kind of controlled hallucination, so that, in other words, they can move beyond the data through simulation to really give us, help us peer around corners, right? To understand cause and effect. We had no idea what the industrial age would do to this planet as we just went full steam ahead, right? And how do we start training models to be able to understand, what could go wrong? And as much as I am very much, and I think we all are very protopian, we need to learn to peer around corners. We already know that the compute is a problem, and the heat in these data centers. In fact, I was at a panel with literally data centers in space, right? And so we're thinking about how we can move them off of here and we can go and destroy space instead. But I just think we're not being futurists. I think everyone in the world, especially corporates, this is an opportunity to completely reinvent how we do business, how we think about solving the grand challenges while still, making profits. We want business to go on, but what are some of the things that we don't know? Like, what do we not know today? What do we don't understand about the ramifications of all of this technology?
So if I may, you mentioned about the simulation. In chats with the Nvidia folks, and I think just in Jensen's keynote as well, like all of the foundational models that they're doing for these humanoid robots. And the reason we have humanoid robots is that you have to put them into a place that was designed for a human, right? If you were designing a warehouse in the morning, like Amazon have done in many places where there's no humans on the floor at all, you have a very different robot, right? You don't need hands and legs and arms and whatever. But 80-90% of the data that was used to train all these models is synthetic. Right? That's what they're using. They haven't been capturing stuff for the last 10 years. It's synthetic data. So the amount of simulations and if I may, I suppose, on your point on a lot of people looking at how things are changing and whatever, a lot of companies at CES talking about, oh, we can create your spatial computing world, your digital twin, your whatever. My words, not theirs. What a lot of them are doing is they're getting better at reality capture, because Niantic, Sony, the phones we have, the whatever, you can now go off and do a quick scan. You don't need a lot of skills. Quick scan, Gaussian splats, yada, yada, yada. You get a decent 3D model of a building, a facility, or whatever. Now, you can use that for the guy who's gone out there tomorrow to have a quick orientation of what he's going to see when he gets there. Now, is that the ultimate digital twin? Is it no, it's not. But as an incremental step in terms of getting things done faster in a workflow, I think we're going to see a lot more of that kind of reality capture stuff in the next 12 months, because the technology is becoming cheap and cheerful.
Yeah. And I want to circle back to your original point, Amy, because you talked a lot about kind of seeing around, peering around the corners and understanding some of those pieces, and then connecting into what Kevin shared. I do think we're getting to this place where reality capture and even the computing power are getting to the point that they can support more and more, whereby those become maybe less of the focal points. And even the hardware, we've talked about that before, that maybe not being the focal point. Excited about what we can potentially do with this as we start to look at, like, I come from a school of, scenario planning, and everything else, actually getting into that, right? And approaching modeling and simulation truly as a scenario that can help us to model out what could happen in the future. And obviously there's a component of that is in the physical world, and looking at, once again, processes and equipment and all of that, modeling out different flows of work and all of those things. But there's also a piece, and I'll bring up the human component over and over again, around the composition of the workforce, what could need to happen if we go around this corner versus this corner, understanding the skills that need to be in place and being able to model and map those, and then simultaneously use those gaps back in the service of modeling and simulation to fill gaps that might exist from a skill set perspective. So we're getting to that point where modeling and simulation, I think, is going to be incredibly important, not just around the visual experience, but once again, around the data and the back end and the way in which we utilize all of the different aspects of skill set in humans, as well as operational performance. And peer around the corner, to Amy's point, what would happen if we went this direction? What would happen in this direction? And hopefully, and this is where I get very encouraged and excited, we can then proactively prepare people for those different scenarios that may play out, so that they take place in a smoother transition, but B, that we get a better outcome for humanity as a result. So I think that modeling and simulation has a huge place. I'm hearing it more and more. Kevin mentioned synthetic. Even in the workforce development space, we're hearing synthetic training, synthetic learning more and more and more, particularly in the defense space, and that's kind of spreading out into some of the other areas. There is an acknowledgement that we need to engage people in an experience that they may not be able to have today, and take the right steps from a preparation perspective to be ready for what might be coming around the corner. So.
And somebody's robotic dog completely agrees with that entire statement. Hear them in the background going.
Agree with the future of simulation. I think I'll have to leave it there though, just because I know we've all got busy things on. We've all got plenty of meetings here going on, speaking about that future that we've all just discussed here in its various avenues and its various landscapes of innovation that Amy, you mentioned as well. And it'd be good to continue this conversation going into this following year in 2025 to speak about where these various lines of technology and innovation are going to go forward, and how that's going to affect XR and most likely other areas too. Jay, Amy, Jennifer, Kevin, thank you all so much for your time once again. I look forward to having plenty more conversations this year.